Picture a specific scene. We're at the absolute height of the frenzy, late 1989. You are watching a corporate salaryman. He's standing on a street corner in Tokyo's Ginza district.
Okay, I can see it.
And he isn't just trying to hail a taxi. He is, and this is wild, he's frantically waving a 10,000 yen note.
Wow.
That's roughly $100 back then. He's trying to bribe a driver just to start for him.
Just to get a ride.
Yeah.
That's an incredible image of confidence or something else.
Exactly. He looks absolutely invincible, radiating this kind of manic confidence.
Right.
And he's telling anyone who listened that Japan has finally eclipsed the West. He even recites this statistic that sounds like a total hallucination.
What was it?
He says that the grounds of the Imperial Palace right down the street are worth more than the entire state of California.
More than all of California. I mean, that's just mind-bending.
And to him, this financial absurdity, it wasn't a bubble about to burst. It was proof of superior engineering. He believed Japan had discovered a kind of secret economic perpetual motion machine. Of course, it felt like the new reality.
But if you look past all the neon, past the cash being waved around, you would find this really strange contradiction.
Okay.
The engine driving all this excess, it wasn't the vibrant innovation of a free market. It was a rigid, government-controlled hierarchy that had barely changed since the war.
So the very thing that built it all up.
The very thing. And that is where the story takes a dramatic turn. Because the exact same guided economy and fierce discipline that allowed his nation to rise from the radioactive ashes of 1945 were the very things about to trap him in what we now call a lost decade. It forces us to ask this haunting question. How did a nation engineer a miracle so perfect that it completely forgot how to evolve?
That powerful opening image, that frantic salaryman, it just perfectly encapsulates the profound contradiction at the heart of Japan's post-war economic success.
It really does.
So for you, the listener, today, the mission isn't really to dwell on the failures of the bubble.
It's more like we need to perform a precise extraction. We need to isolate the functional essence of this huge Japanese economic structure.
The machine itself.
Exactly. That critical blend of direct economics, these tightly knit corporate groups, and a uniquely successful human capital philosophy.
And then see if it applies today.
And determine if that core essence holds any enduring relevance for today's developing economies in Southeast Asia. I mean, this region is navigating a level of global volatility we've never seen before.
You're talking about severe economic shocks, shifting geopolitics,
and the massive non-negotiable undertaking of the green transition. So the question is, can the lessons from a nation that perfected the blueprint of industrial power be effectively adapted to build modern adaptive resilience?
Okay, let's unpack this blueprint then, because the whole idea of a guided economy, it has to rely on some powerful organizational mechanisms to actually execute the plan.
Yes.
And in Japan, that mechanism was, and in many ways still is, the Keiretsu groups. These were the corporate structures that put the policy into practice.
Precisely. The Keiretsu are absolutely critical to understanding this. If you are looking for the connective tissue of Japan's post-war economic growth, this is it.
So what are they in simple terms?
In simple terms, these groups are large, very sophisticated clusters of independently managed firms. But the key, the absolute key, is that they maintain incredibly close, stable, and often mandatory economic and financial ties.
I think we need to make sure you understand that these weren't just friendly relationships between companies. This was something much deeper.
That's right. This wasn't just, a casual agreement. The cohesion was cemented by formal governance mechanisms.
Like what?
Often involving partial cross-ownership. So firms own shares in each other. Interlocking directorates, where an executive from one company would sit on the board of another.
So they're all in each other's business.
Literally. And perhaps most famously, the president's clubs, which basically functioned as the strategic steering committees at the very highest level. These groups were designed for long-term survival and collective strategy, not just short-term transactions.
And crucially, this was not a purely free market thing happening on its own. The state's hand was deeply, deeply involved using these structures.
Oh, absolutely. The sources confirm that throughout the high-growth period, the Keiretsu were, and I'm quoting here, part and parcel of Japan's industrial dirigism.
Industrial dirigism. Can you break that down?
You can think of it as strategic state direction of the economy.
Right.
These corporate groups were the critical vehicle, the pipeline, through which state-created capital.
So government.
Often channeled through specific governmental banks and funds, yes. And it was deliberately directed into these high-priority investment projects. These were the projects deemed essential by industrial policies, like those conceptualized and pushed by influential bodies like the Ministry of International Trade and Industry, MIT.
So if the government had a massive long-term vision, like, say, they wanted to dominate the global semiconductor market or steel production,
Right.
the Keiretsu were the pipelines that made sure the money, the talent, and the technology went exactly where they needed to go.
Exactly. Their core functional advantage was their ability to reduce what economists call coordination failures.
Okay.
Imagine a massive multi-year project like building a whole new generation of high-speed rail. No single independent firm would be willing or even able to shoulder that enormous risk and cost alone.
It's just too big.
Way too big. The Keiretsu structure allowed the risk to be distributed and the long-term commitment guaranteed across the entire network. It made these otherwise impossible large-scale ventures highly feasible. They were centralized risk managers for national ambition.
The sources mention two different types of these groups, the horizontal and the vertical. And this distinction seems really important because they solve different problems in the economy.
The vital distinction, yeah.
So how should you picture the difference between these two?
Let's start with the horizontal Keiretsu. These are the huge conglomerates, the big names you'd recognize, like Mitsui, Mitsubishi, Sumitomo, the giants. They span multiple, often unrelated industries. Finance, manufacturing, energy, trading, you name it. Their cohesion is maintained through that extensive cross-shareholding we mentioned, the main bank, and the coordination of the President's Club.
So these horizontal groups, they're kind of the successors to the big historical family enterprises, but they had a different history, right? The pre-war Zaibatsu were famously rigid.
They were. The Zaibatsu were the original pre-war, pyramidal, family-controlled holding companies. Immensely powerful.
And the American occupation after the war, they specifically targeted them.
They did. The occupation explicitly aimed to dissolve them to introduce a free enterprise economy. The authorities selected 10 of the largest conglomerates for dissolution, transferring the shares from the ruling family clans into non-negotiable government bonds.
Which became worthless.
Post-war inflation basically wiped out the value of those bonds. It completely removed the financial power base of the clans.
But history, or maybe just institutional gravity, it kind of reasserted itself.
It did. The structures reemerged in the 1950s and 60s, but they evolved. They shifted from being family-controlled to having more of an associational character. And crucially, they became bank-centered.
Bank-centered.
Highly dependent on indirect financing. This shift was absolutely key to the economic miracle because it linked the state's strategic capital directly to industrial production through the banking system.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's look at the vertical Keiretsu.
Those are fundamentally different. They're specialized pyramids focused entirely on supply chain efficiency.
Not a big sprawling conglomerate.
No. They center around one massive core manufacturer. You should think of Toyota, Nissan, or Hitachi. These vertical groups are made of a highly layered, multi-tier system of suppliers and subsidiaries.
All feeding the main company.
Focused almost entirely on the core company's needs. And this is maintained through long-term production and technical relationships. They are less about broad conglomerate power and much more about perfecting a single value chain.
That bank-centered structure brings us to the functional advantages that really made the system so resilient, at least in its early decades. The inter-firm collaboration was extraordinary.
It really was. One of the most fascinating advantages was the way they managed internal financial risk. They called it risk distribution.
How did that work?
Within the group, business transactions often used transfer prices that deliberately differed from the prevailing market prices. This was a rational, implicit strategy to even out the aggregate profits of the group as a whole.
Wait, hold on. Let me make sure I'm getting this. So a profitable car manufacturer might deliberately overpay a parts supplier within the same Keiretsu if that supplier was having a lean year.
Exactly. Or if a group member failed to profit, there might be contrapayments or even internal subsidies made to keep them solvent and stable. The philosophical underpinning was profound. They were deliberately sacrificing short-term profit maximization for long-term group stability and collective survival.
That is a fundamental clash with the shareholder-first model of Western capitalism.
A complete clash.
Yeah.
And it drove incredible resilience.
That makes the main bank system the absolute financial heart of the horizontal groups because someone had to underwrite all of that stability.
Precisely. Every major horizontal group centered around a main city bank. And this bank acted as both a major lender and a shareholder.
So it had skin in the game on both sides.
Right. It was, in effect, their own internal financial market. This structure ensured a stable supply of relatively cheap capital for rapid expansion, which was especially critical for the smaller firms within the group that might have struggled to secure financing elsewhere.
And the protective element was massive, wasn't it? It wasn't just about cheap loans.
It was everything. This system protected group members from the threat of hostile takeovers. The main bank was the strategic investor and the monitor.
So it was a watchdog.
It was. If a company's finances were stable, the bank was pretty passive. But if the company faced a crisis, the bank became immediately actively involved in a rescue operation, often sending its own executives to restructure management. The goal was preserving the group structure and employment.
Not maximizing returns on capital.
Exactly. A completely different priority.
Okay, so beyond the finance, you needed intelligence, you needed information. And that's where the trading companies, the Sogo Shosha, came in as the group's central nervous system.
They were indispensable. The Sogo Shosha performed a whole variety of roles that are really hard to parallel in modern segmented economies. They acted as crucial information agencies.
What kind of information?
They gathered and distributed specialized market data, particularly foreign data, across the entire network. If Mitsubishi needed to know the political risks in Southeast Asia, or the demand for a specific commodity in Europe,
Sogo Shosha had people on the ground.
they had the deep reach to find that information. They were the eyes and ears of the group globally.
And they had a kind of quasi-banking role, too, helping weather recessions.
Yes, they were financial shock absorbers themselves. They could ameliorate recessionary effects through intragroup trade, like granting loans to suppliers or providing extended credit for purchasing materials.
It's just this incredible synergy.
It was. The main bank securing stable finance, and the trading house securing markets, materials, and information. It was an unbeatable combination for rapid, directed industrial expansion.
So we've established that this model, which had guided capital, collective risk sharing, centralized information, it drove that incredible post-war rise. It was a machine built for stability and growth.
It was.
But we started with the haunting question. This very structure became the source of the rigidity that trapped Japan. So when did that resilience become rigidity?
It really became a problem when the external environment shifted dramatically in the 1990s, particularly with financial liberalization and deregulation sweeping the globe.
The world changed.
The world changed, and the Keiretsu finance model, which was optimized for stability and industrial expansion through bank lending, it just struggled to adapt to a world demanding market-based capital and higher returns on equity. The cost of rigidity began to outweigh the benefits.
What were the clearest costs? Where did it really start to hurt?
The primary costs were seen in, well, efficiency and innovation. The main bank felt obligated to perform these inefficient rescue operations for failing firms.
Propping up zombie companies.
That's the term for it. And that tied up vast amounts of capital that should have been allowed to fail. Furthermore, the very security and stability the structure provided, it potentially discouraged necessary risk-taking.
Right, no incentive to innovate.
Why take a huge risk on a new technology when you know the group will protect you anyway? It stifled the bold innovation required to compete in rapidly changing global markets.
And what happened to those highly specialized vertical keiretsu, the suppliers that were so dependent on the core manufacturer? That brings us to the hollowing out problem.
This was a severe systemic consequence linked directly to globalization. As the large Japanese transnational corporations increased their outward foreign direct investment, they started shifting their production bases overseas.
Outsourcing.
Primarily to lower-cost nations in Asia. This shift drastically reduced the demand for intermediate goods supplied by the Japanese small and medium-sized enterprises, the domestic suppliers, and the vertical keiretsu networks. It just isolated them from the economy's engine.
So the core corporation globalizes its production, its supply chain, and leaves its loyal domestic suppliers stranded.
Precisely. This relatively unrestrained shift of production was diagnosed as a massive strategic failure of the Japanese economy. The network, which was supposed to guarantee cohesion and resilience, ultimately failed to protect its most vulnerable domestic parts.
And that contributed to long-term industrial decline in Japan proper.
It did. It's a perfect illustration that even the most meticulously engineered system, when it becomes too rigid, can fail to adapt to global market forces.
That gives us a really complete picture of the corporate side. It was a fantastic structural answer to the challenge of rebuilding, but a poor mechanism for continuous evolution.
Right.
But the miracle wasn't just about capital and corporate networks. The productivity gains were rooted in the factory floor, in the human engine. That's the second, equally powerful pillar we need to analyze.
Yes, the unique human capital philosophy that permeated these large Keiretsu-affiliated firms is absolutely inseparable from the success story. It really explains how that incredible efficiency was achieved, even within a protected, rigid environment.
Let's talk about that paternalistic labor foundation. It fundamentally redefined the relationship between management and labor in a way that's hard for us to grasp today.
It did. Post-war labor relations evolved into a partner-oriented system built on two core pillars: lifetime employment,
The famous one?
and the seniority merit wage system. This model dramatically increased the psychological and practical sense of security for managers and employees. And critically, this arrangement also minimized the influence of external shareholders.
Who were basically treated as marginal players.
They were. Their short-term demands didn't really drive the company's overall strategy.
So the company provided continuous employment, even during a bad recession, and in return, the employee committed their entire professional career to that one firm. Loyalty and continuous learning were prioritized above all else.
That mutuality created this profound stability, trust, and a deep identification with the firm's fortune. If you knew you couldn't be fired and your wages would increase steadily based on your tenure, you had a powerful incentive to make the firm succeed.
It's a social contract.
It is. And this harmonious, stable labor environment was the fertile ground that allowed for the successful introduction of these sophisticated management methods adjusted to Japanese customs. Things like just-in-time, JIT, total quality management, TQM, and of course the internationally famous Kaizen.
Kaizen. Formalized by Toyota, it's become a global metaphor for continuous improvement. If someone hasn't worked in a manufacturing context, what are the two foundational pillars of the Toyota Way philosophy?
They are, simply put, continuous improvement, which is Kaizen itself, and respect for people. The Toyota Way, which is detailed in 14 management principles, is essentially a system designed to provide tools for people
At every level.
at every single level to continually improve their work environment and their processes. It's not just a technical system, it's a culture.
Let's focus on the process and quality first. That's where the elimination of waste muta is so central.
That's the operational heart of the system. The philosophy dictates redesigning work to eliminate the 7 types of waste:
Which are?
defects, overproduction, waiting, non-utilized talent, transportation, inventory, motion, and extra processing. The key is that the process is structured to flow continuously, which has the essential function of immediately surfacing problems.
You can't hide a bottleneck.
Exactly. You can't hide a bottleneck when the flow is continuous. It becomes immediately obvious.
And the most radical element, I think, is the quality precedence principle, Jidoka. This is what truly empowers the worker on the line.
It is absolute empowerment. Jidoka means automation with a human touch. It dictates that quality precedence is absolute. Any employee, from a line worker to a supervisor, has the authority and the obligation to stop the entire production process.
The whole line.
The entire line, immediately, to signal and fix a quality issue. That sounds simple, but it is a radical inversion of traditional factory hierarchy, where stopping the line was anathema.
You just don't do it.
The cost of stopping the line is deemed less than the cost of pushing a known defect downstream.
It also requires more than just stopping the line. It requires leveling the workload, or haijunka. Why is that so important for sustainable improvement?
Haijunka is all about building a smooth, sustainable rhythm. It means avoiding miri, or overburdening people or equipment, and mura, which is unevenness.
So no big peaks and valleys in production.
Right. You are not trying to maximize output one week with a massive order and then have zero work the next, which is often what bankrupts small businesses. Haijunka requires carefully sequencing production volume and variety so that the entire system, human and mechanical, operates at a steady, sustainable pace.
It's a recognition that sustainable, long-term human effort is more valuable than just sporadic bursts of high efficiency.
That's it, exactly.
This philosophy clearly extends beyond the shop floor and demands a very high level of personal immersion from management, which we know as Genchi Genbutsu.
Genchi Genbutsu means go and see for yourself. Managers are expected to leave their desks, go to the actual work site, the gemba, and personally evaluate operations firsthand to thoroughly understand the situation or the problem.
You can't solve it from an office.
You can't solve a problem with data alone. You have to see the reality. I once heard a story, it might be apocryphal, but it's illustrative, of a Toyota executive insisting on sleeping on the factory floor just to understand the production noise and temperature changes throughout the night.
Wow, that's commitment.
That level of personal, ground-level involvement is what's demanded.
And that personal inspection is always followed by relentless reflection.
That's Hansei. It means relentless reflection, constantly and critically examining every aspect of what the company does, acknowledging failure and seeking improvement. This combination of Genchi Genbutsu, seeing the truth, and Hansei, reflecting on it, is what transforms a company into a true learning organization. It ensures continuous adaptation.
It sounds like a beautifully integrated system built on high trust and deep commitment. But the source material is very honest here. Transplanting this highly specific machine into other cultures presents a massive challenge.
It does. When major Japanese corporations expanded internationally, they found that concepts deeply ingrained in the Japanese psyche.
Like what, specifically?
Well, the willingness to stop production, the mutual ownership of problems, or the demanding Kaizen mind, which is a state of unending proactive crisis awareness. These were completely unfamiliar or even contrary to local cultures in North America, Europe, or other parts of Asia.
So, when researchers examined the transferability of Kaizen, for instance, in an Indonesian manufacturing context, did they confirm that the technical system was easy to install, but the culture was the hard part?
That's exactly what they found. And the findings are highly relevant for Southeast Asia today. They identified a framework of success factors. And while technical factors like tooling and workflow are essential, highest prioritized factors for success were not technical at all.
What were they?
They included top management commitment, management support, and crucially, national culture and traditions.
So it has to fit the local context.
Exactly. Organization culture and employee participation were also prioritized. But the core lesson was that success relies fundamentally not just on installing the process steps, but on deeply ingrained organizational support and alignment with national cultural norms. You can't just import the clipboard, you have to import the philosophy.
That pivot from the rigid yet successful Japanese model to the modern challenges facing developing nations in Southeast Asia is precisely where we need to apply these lessons. Japan's failure was rigidity in the face of new shocks. Modern Asia is dealing with a world defined by what analysts are calling the polycrisis.
If the Keiretsu struggled to adapt to financial deregulation, just imagine the complexity facing developing nations today.
Yeah.
The polycrisis is the convergence of multiple, severe global shocks.
The lingering effects of pandemics.
Geopolitical conflicts, massive climate change impacts, and trade tensions. These shocks underscore an urgent need for industrial resilience, the capacity for a nation's industrial base to withstand, adapt, and recover from profound concurrent shocks.
And what's fascinating here is that industrial strength is proven not just to be an economic goal, but a structural tool for national stability.
We see a statistically powerful link that elevates industrial capacity beyond just its GDP contribution. There's a strong positive correlation, 0.54 globally, and even higher at 0.64 in Southeast Asia.
Between what and what?
Between a country's industrial capabilities, which is measured by the UNIDO Competitive Industrial Performance Index, and its societal resilience, which is measured by the World Risk Poll Resilience Index.
Wait, if industrial capability is the single most crucial factor mitigating these shocks, why is the correlation only 0.54 globally? What does that missing 46% represent? Is it just governance, or are other factors like social cohesion or natural resource wealth at play?
That's an important, critical question to ask. And while industrial capability is powerful, it doesn't stand alone. The remaining correlation gap likely reflects crucial factors, such as institutional quality, effective public governance, and social safety nets.
But manufacturing is the foundation.
The data clearly establishes it as the foundation. For example, econometric analysis of projected output losses during the COVID-19 pandemic revealed that industrial capabilities were statistically the most crucial factor mitigating the economic impact.
So a robust manufacturing base acts as a structural shock absorber. When the system is hit by a global crisis, it provides essential goods, it allows for rapid retooling.
Like shifting production to PPE or ventilators during a health crisis.
And it offers a solid sector for economic recovery and employment stability.
Exactly. It's the economic backbone that prevents a total collapse. But the contribution isn't just national. It translates into significant, tangible benefits for individual workers, a sort of human dividend that stabilizes households against shocks.
We often have an outdated, maybe even a negative perception of factory work. What does the data actually say about safety and job quality?
It paints a much better picture than popular imagination might suggest. Globally, manufacturing is consistently reported as one of the safest industries. Workers report some of the lowest rates of serious physical harm.
And why is that?
It's a direct result of strict occupational health regulations and massive investments in automation and robotics designed to remove human workers from the most high-risk tasks.
And that Kaizen spirit, that continuous drive for improvement, is reflected in the safety statistics themselves.
It is. Over 40% of manufacturing employees report feeling safer now than they did 5 years ago. That's the highest share across all sectors polled. This improvement is continuously driven by technology adoption, like autonomous vehicles for transporting hazardous goods or drones for inspecting elevated structures, which systemically eliminate human risk.
And the financial security is huge for household resilience.
It's a game changer for stability. Manufacturing jobs are typically formal, contract-based, and relatively well-paid compared to highly informal sectors. This provides greater financial resilience.
What does that look like in numbers?
Globally, 72.1% of manufacturing workers reported that their household could cover basic needs for over 3 months without income. That's the highest rate among all sectors. In Southeast Asia, that figure is 64.7%, which is substantially higher than agriculture or informal services. It shows that manufacturing provides a vital layer of financial security against income shocks.
There's also data showing the workplace environment fosters greater inclusivity and lower stress.
The sector reports a lower incidence of discrimination compared to non-market services, which includes public administration and healthcare. This inclusivity might be due to stricter regulatory environments and the more impersonal, process-driven nature of manufacturing work.
Right.
Furthermore, the stability and clearer career pathways in the sector correlate with fewer workers reporting serious mental health issues compared to highly volatile or high-stress sectors. Manufacturing is building safer, wealthier, and more stable communities.
However, this very sector, which is the key to resilience, is now facing entirely new existential risks that the old Japanese model never had to consider.
That's the crux of the modern challenge. The primary new risk is the extreme vulnerability of complex, multi-tier supply networks, which is dramatically exacerbated by climate change.
Southeast Asia is on the front line of that.
Highly vulnerable geographically. It's seen a 20% plus increase in typhoons since 2012 alone. These extreme weather events result in immediate production delays, infrastructural damage, and cost spikes. They demand entirely new resilient strategies focused on localization, redundancy, and diversification outside of traditional hubs.
And the technological frontier, the adoption of Industry 4.0, while essential for productivity, introduces a whole new class of risks.
Oh, absolutely. The integration of AI, robotics, and copbots collaborative robots introduces new physical hazards. Mechanical, thermal, and electrical risks from human interaction with machines that are designed to work alongside them.
Think cyber risks.
Simultaneously, the profound digitization of manufacturing processes creates severe new security risks. Cyber attacks can compromise not just data, but the physical processes themselves. The public response in Southeast Asia reflects this duality. Views on AI are mixed, with 36.7% seeing it as a help, but a significant 30.2% fearing harm. It underscores the urgent need for mindful policy and regulation to govern this technological transition.
So we've established that industrial strength is key to resilience, but the old Japanese blueprint, rigid, protected, and optimized for a different era, it can't simply be copied.
No.
The modern approach requires technocratic planning that accounts for climate, digital risk, and geopolitical tension. This brings us to the policy and practice in Southeast Asia today. It looks like governments are adopting the spirit of Japan's targeted state intervention, that industrial dirigism, but adapting it for modern green value chains.
That's the most exciting parallel. We are seeing a new, targeted form of industrial policy focused on localization, green growth, and strategic value chain upgrading. The state is intervening to shape the market, much like the post-war Japanese model. Take the case of Indonesia's nickel export controls.
That policy is pure state strategy. It's designed to radically re-engineer a value chain for maximum national benefit.
It is. Indonesia has massive nickel reserves, which are essential for stainless steel and EV batteries. They realized that merely exporting raw ore left them vulnerable to global commodity price volatility and deprived them of higher value-added jobs.
So they put a stop to it.
By imposing a comprehensive ban on raw ore exports in 2014 and strategically reinstating it in 2020, they essentially forced domestic smelting and processing. The results were explosive.
What was the scale of that transformation?
The number of domestic smelters grew from just 2 before 2014 to 29 by 2021. This attracted significant foreign direct investment, particularly from major industrial players, boosting downstream industries like stainless steel and ferronickel, creating employment, and dramatically increasing foreign exchange earnings.
It's a classic example of targeted policy intervention.
It is, embedding high value-added activity within the national borders, reinforcing economic resilience against relying solely on raw commodity exports.
That is a national resource strategy. On the opposite extreme, you have land-scarce Singapore pursuing a similar localization strategy, but driven by technology, focusing on food security.
Singapore's 30 by 30 food vision is a forward-leaning defense strategy. They recognize that depending on imports for over 90% of their food is a massive vulnerability in the polycrisis era.
So what's the goal?
The government aims to produce 30% of their nutritional needs locally by 2030, and this transformation is entirely policy-driven.
How does the government actively steer this transformation, given the constraints of urban space?
Well, the Singapore Food Agency, the SFA, actively allocates the scarce cultivation space. It provides R&D grants for sophisticated high-tech urban farming. We're talking vertical farms, hydroponics, aquaculture, and it develops certification schemes to guarantee quality and safety.
It's technocratic planning in action.
It is, guiding capital and innovation to reinforce resilience against market shocks, climate change, and geopolitical disruptions affecting global supply chains. They are literally engineering an industry where none existed before.
Moving from strategic localization to coordinated resource management, we see modern policies that reflect the closed-loop efficiency focus inherent in the old Keiretsu networks, but applied to sustainability.
That coordination is vital. You could look at Vietnam's eco-industrial parks, or EIPs. This is a model for harmonizing rapid industrialization with environmental stewardship. These parks are supported by government decrees and international programs, utilizing shared utilities, waste symbiosis, and heat recovery across multiple independent firms.
What does waste symbiosis look like in practice, and what are the quantifiable benefits?
Waste symbiosis means the waste stream of one industry becomes the input for another, creating a circular mini ecosystem. For example, excess steam or heat from a processing plant might be routed to heat greenhouses or dry materials for a nearby packaging company.
And the results?
The results in the 9 pilot EIPs have been remarkable. Annual savings of 22,000 megawatt hours of electricity, 140 terajoules of fuel, 600,000 cubic meters of water, and a reduction of 32 kilotons of co-erosions. This approach is a 21st century analog to Keiretsu coordination, focused on maximizing resource efficiency and meeting climate goals.
And the Philippines is tackling a massive modern resource problem, e-waste, using a similar community coordination approach.
The initiatives led by the DR and UNIDO there formalized the entire process of e-waste recycling. They established community-based disassembly centers, complete with proper safety equipment and technical training.
And that serves a dual purpose.
It does. It reduces toxic pollution, which is a massive public health risk from informal recycling, and simultaneously it builds a closed-loop circular economy. By transitioning informal recyclers into cooperatives and guaranteeing them a market, they strengthen the domestic supply chain's resilience by reducing dependence on expensive imported raw materials.
Finally, let's look at how nations are strategically upgrading their entire production base to align with the massive global green transition, taking advantage of existing industrial strengths.
Malaysia's electric mobility transition is a prime example of leveraging prior success. They have a really robust electrical and electronics, or E&E sector, which is now being leveraged to accelerate EV adoption and manufacturing. Government policies have successfully attracted major investment, including assembly plants for major automakers, and have aggressively scaled charging infrastructure. Their target is 10,000 charging stations by 2025.
So they're using state direction to transform an existing industrial strength E&E components into a new future-proof industry.
Right.
And that enhances energy resilience by diversifying away from volatile fossil fuels.
That's the core strategy. It strengthens domestic supply chains while simultaneously tackling climate goals, providing long-term economic stability that is adapted for the global energy shift.
And Thailand is applying technocratic planning to its most vital and environmentally vulnerable sector, rice cultivation.
The Thai Low-Emission Rice Nationally Appropriate Mitigation Action, or NAMA project, is a comprehensive program targeting greenhouse gas reduction in the rice sector, which is massive both economically and ecologically.
It's a multifaceted approach.
It is. It combines farmer training in specific low-emission practices like laser land leveling for efficient water use and site-specific nutrient management, with support for agricultural entrepreneurs and national policy reform.
Why is this relevant to industrial resilience?
It builds climate mitigation and adaptation capacity in a sector that employs over 30% of their population. If that sector fails due to climate shocks or water scarcity, the country's entire resilience is jeopardized. By proactively planning for climate-smart agriculture, Thailand is ensuring long-term food security and workforce stability. This is the new definition of strategic economic planning, engineering resilience not just in factories, but in fields as well.
So we've spent this deep dive analyzing how the structures that drove Japan's post-war miracle, the guided capital, the tightly integrated corporate networks, and the relentless focus on human capital and productivity through Kaizen, how they offer a powerful, though cautionary, historical reference point.
And what we see today is that while the rigid Keiretsu system was unsuitable for a globalized, deregulated world, the core lessons of directed economics have been adapted brilliantly in Southeast Asia.
Right.
Modern industrial policies are implementing strategic state support, like Indonesia's nickel strategy. They're fostering resilient corporate ecosystems through localization and circularity, like in Singapore and the Vietnam EIPs. And they're prioritizing safe, stable, high-quality jobs. The Kaizen spirit applied to safety and financial security.
Yeah.
This active, technocratic planning, backed by empirical evidence that industrial capability mitigates global shocks, is the key to building dynamic, adaptive economies capable of thriving amid continuous global volatility. The shift from simply relying on competitive labor costs to engineering sophisticated, resilient, and green-focused industrial systems. Well, that is the true measure of enduring progress.